Hello, welcome back to the temple. Today we're continuing the Esoteric Seven. We're now on part 4. In our previous video, we discussed the nature of man within the human kingdom, his relation within the center of the cosmos, his realization as a higher being, as well as his correspondence to the fourth ray of harmony and beauty. Now we are moving into the final 3 of the 7, which happen to correspond and contain similarities of the first 3, with the exception of the 4th, as discussed in the previous video, which is the crossing of them all and the central balancer of the 2 sides. For instance, if on the first side, we have the first ray of will power, second ray of love, wisdom, and third ray of adaptability and active intelligence, then on the next side, proceeding from the 4th, we get the 5th ray of concrete data and science, which corresponds to the 3rd ray, the 6th ray of passion devotion, which corresponds to the 2nd ray, and finally the 7th ray of order, ceremonial rituals, and spirit into matter, which corresponds to the 1st ray. If it makes it easier to understand, imagine the 4th ray to be the peak of a mountaintop. It is the heart center of the 7, therefore it is the highest and most exalted of them all. Then on either side of the peak, we begin to descend into mirrored proportions. This is how the Esoteric Seven operate. Away from their central point, they reflect and thus mirror each other, resulting in balance. The same applies when one puts his hands together, as in that of meditation. The middle finger becomes the central point of both hands, while on either side, there is both an index of reason and thumb of justice, as well as a ring finger of devotion and a pinky of pride, humility, which are but one and of the same equilibrium. The same applies to the 7 kingdoms of nature as well as the 7 planes of existence. Of the 7 kingdoms, the mineral kingdom would be the negative polarity of the first positive elemental. The vegetable kingdom would be the negative polarity of the second positive elemental. The animal kingdom would be the negative polarity of the 3rd positive elemental. And finally, the human kingdom would be the balance and equilibrium of them all, or intermediary between them. Furthermore, the physical plane would be the negative to the positive Adi in regards to the planes of existence. So Adi would be the supremely divine plane, corresponding to the first ray. So then the physical plane down below would be the negatively polarized version of the positive Adi. And then the astral plane would be the negatively polarized version of the positive monadic plane, corresponding also to the 2nd ray. Then the mental plane would be the negative to the positive atmic, higher self, or the plane of cosmic consciousness. And finally, the Buddhic plane would also be the balancer and the equilibrator of them all. Hence the teachings of Buddhism, teachings of oneness, achieving a sort of spiritual stasis, a stillness, and a selfless kind of love, which balances all of the other energies as stated above. For instance, if the first ray of positively charged will power and supremely divine Adi decided to manifest itself into matter, it, like a light switch, switched its own polarities, resulting in a negative production upon the physical mineral plane, becoming the root of the dark cosmic deep, submerging itself into and becoming darkness. But it also resulted in the 7th ray, which is governed by the moon. So basically, the Adi would, if you could look at it like this spiritual sun, then the 7th ray, or 7th production, is ruled by the moon, which is the negative polarity. Excuse me. Basically, it started off as a solar being, a spiritual sun, and upon manifesting itself, it hence transformed into a lunar being, the feminine results of its action. But it also paved the way to a universal order and recognizing the divine in the material form. It is no coincidence that during the new moon phase of the calendar, plants and vegetation are more likely to sprout from the roots of the earth, while the dark cosmic roots of the night sky are all to be seen. For in that time, the moon has finally escaped the light of the physical sun and is fully able to incubate her spiritual seed, his spiritual seeds, the sons. All of this described was the first great sacrifice of heaven. It was the Father who sacrificed himself for life, hence becoming the Son born from the dark womb of matter. He thus became cloaked and hidden within each respective son or child, and only upon true cosmic realization did he thus reveal himself. In another instance, the positively charged second ray of love wisdom, as well as the great monadic source of all, resulted in the negatively charged sixth ray of passion devotion within both the astral realm and vegetative generative realm. These lower realms took the precious concepts of oneness, unity, and wholeness and subjectively divided them into isolated, self-idealized, individualized, and personalized entities, which only saw themselves as separate from the cosmos, separate from the group, separate from their own nations, beliefs, systems, and beyond. And unfortunately, this was perhaps the worst form of manifestations of the seven, but it was only because the powers of the monad and the second ray of love wisdom are so powerfully potent that the time comes when they must fall down into the equally vibrational and equally proportionate underworld of their gatherings. So just as when one is walking along the top of a great hill or mountain, it is only when they begin to walk down it that they realize just how high up they really were. And when they finally reach the valleys below, they look out and see the great peaks from which they descended and once so carelessly inhabited, remembering their calling, their narrow path, and they begin to see what true devotion really means. So instead of falling to the false devotion that gets so many people in trouble and in fights and in wars and battles, they begin to see what the true devotion means, which means to return back to oneness. For example, just as one who is part of a great universal circle sees not their most honorable illuminated positionment because they're part of the circle, the outer ring, the circle, they thus journey out to become the point within the circle, the full self-realization, the great identity of God. But when they do, they forever see the place from which they departed. So the result is great pain and suffering. But the wise man accepts this suffering and forever vows to carry himself back to the circle of oneness, slowly and surely shaking the layers of pain like a snake sheds its skin, with every step and advancement he makes back up to the great mountain of immortality. It was our duty to begin in a most holy of holies, so that we may depart from it and establish our identities upon the plane of matter, so that we may decide that we would like to return to it anyways, despite the illusions, distractions, and follies of the material world, be it money, power, success, popularity, or fame. So we were unaware of just how great the holy place was until we made the decision to depart from it. And then once we did, we saw just how great it really was and forever vowed to make a return to it. Finally, the third emanation, being the first opposite within the heavenly chain above, thus differentiated itself, becoming negatively charged, and the third plane of the higher self, or atmic plane, descended into the positively charged third plane of the mental body, which corresponds as well to the third ray of active intelligence and fifth ray of concrete science. The results were quite literally the great science. It served as the great mother of materialization and adaptability in the resulting formation and cycles of laws, time, differentiations, symbols, patterns, as well as negatively subjective knowledge above in comparison with the positively charged objective data below. This would be the means of sending forth data streams and downloads of information, while also serving as a teacher of the great laws of the universe. For example, it first teaches of the law of polarity because it first manifests as the third and final part of the Trinity, resulting in great darkness. But it manifests below in the form of the solar plexus, the animal kingdom, the region of which the intellectual mind finally perceives itself within existence, learning all the laws of hierarchies, animal nature, and especially instinct. This instinct, being perhaps the most important in understanding the nature of human evolution and conscious expansion, is the secret to obtaining the knowledge of the great dragon, who is like a vast library of wisdom. And if one would simply study the hierarchy, from lions to tigers, tigers to wolves, goats to sheep, then they might be able to grasp the true significance to the grand order and scheme of all things. After all, it is the true goats who chase the sheep. But on the other side of instinct is pure intellect, the only difference being the laws of fours versus the laws of fives. For instance, all animals only possess 4 fingers, or paws, but they are also perfectly equilibrated, balanced, and naturally trained upon the physical plane in regard to the art of precision, accuracy, agility, movement, and discipline. They are quite literally like the great dragon, only that they lack the essential intellectual elements. On the other hand, you have gorillas and humans who were granted a 5th finger or paw, which in turn granted them the more intellectual ability to be as creators, to use tools, to write, to construct, build, and be able to envision their own godlike minds. But they were also imbalanced, more awkward with their movements and precision, and lacking in much of the dragon's core teachings, which is also strongly based in instinct. But if we happen to take ourselves out east into China and the Eastern world, we may see signs of that great dragon of instinctive wisdom becoming prevalent yet again. Sure, they may have denied objective reality and certain forms of concrete science, but it was only so that they may embrace the great dragon even more, implementing it into their own lives and perhaps learning more of its subjective wisdom than we as Westerners could do. However, on the other side, those special Westerners who have truly grasped the ultimate science have only just begun to peek into that veil of animalistically integrated spiritual life, thus seeing its correspondences, and are just now paving the way for the true teachings of concrete science, which is through the form of the mental body and especially the logos or word, which almost literally transmutes all of the data derived from systems such as Darwinism and beyond, or quite possibly the systems created by our lower physical sun, which is negatively charged to the spiritual one, and results in the upflow of that great universal substance, which seeks to redeem itself. So if you like this information, like and subscribe, and come back for the next one. Have a great day.